in Hollywood, all that is coveted, well, namely fame and fortune, are followed by one thing: landing a film role. But as you know, not all roles are created equally. So today on Celebrity Soapbox, we hear from some of your favorite stars about their favorite roles. How did they research for them? What did they do to prepare? What scared them about taking on an entirely different personality? Well, as it turns out, even the best of the best oftentimes doubt their abilities to do it well.
I think that's every actor's dream, to try to somehow become somebody else, even if it's only for half of a second of the whole performance. But not because you want people to see that, but because you want to do that for yourself. Because that makes sense. That's what makes sense to the job. To try to be somebody else and see the world with different eyes. And then go back to your own world with your own self and understand the world better. But that will be a goal for any actor, I think. But that doesn't mean that it happens. And I don't think that I'm good at that at all. I try, but I never saw myself in a place where I go, wow, that's not me. No, it's always me with my flaws and with my sometimes good things also.
I didn't know anything about Eileen when I read the script, and I was only introduced to Eileen's world after I really reacted to the script. And then all of a sudden everything else changed for me because it was a person's life, and I'd never taken that responsibility before. And then in just really studying her and going into her life, I knew that it was a lot for me to do. And I think it's part of the creative process. I mean, it never kind of got to that place where I thought, well, now I have it, I know exactly what to do. I had doubts all the way, you know?
The first night I didn't sleep at all. I just didn't think I could get the accent down. I didn't think I was the right person to play it. I didn't know if I could ever find the balance of her strength and her emotions, and I just didn't know if I would be able to convey all the things that I'd come to really admire her in her as a woman. And so it was just a certain kind of pressure. I never felt like I was good enough. You know, every day I kind of woke up thinking I'm not good enough to do this.
The lovely Charlize Theron has very little, if nothing, in common with the serial killer she portrays in Monster. Yet several of the actors we hear from say they had to find some way to connect with the darker, less likable characters they portray. Challenging, yet oftentimes the most rewarding task.
I think I probably wouldn't have really been able to play this part if I hadn't been a mother myself. You know, the mother that I play in this film she's not a particularly good one. In fact, she's kind of a bad mother. And it was hard playing somebody who had qualities as a parent that I didn't necessarily respect myself as a human being. So, you know, it wasn't actually that easy to play those sides of her. But I think, you know, I had the flip side of the coin. I had the kind of hands-on, fabulous approach to parenting, and I was able to use a lot of that in terms of judging who my character really was and who she was also aspiring to be too.
Sure. Do you think that's a really challenging part of the craft, to play somebody that you have moral objections with? You know,
it can be sometimes. It can be, but it can also be, you know, one of the great sides of it too. You know, it's a real privilege as an actor to get to explore characters that you don't necessarily like sometimes, and also to play people who you just never think you would get given that opportunity. You know, my first instinct when I read the script was, well, why do they want me? I mean, I don't know if I can do this. And then the next thought is, okay, well, maybe that's why I should be thinking about doing it then, because it's going to be challenging and it'll be hard. And it was all of those things, and you know, ended up being a really rewarding experience.
Because I really truly believe in my heart that Eileen was not, or did not start off as an evil person. I believe that Eileen was raised in very unfortunate circumstances and got to a place in her life where she definitely crossed the line and made some really bad decisions in her life. But I was really interested in how a good person crosses that line and becomes somebody who makes really bad choices.
Well, I get offered a lot of things that I don't do. I actually turn down a lot of roles. I think for me, it has to have something, particularly later in my career, like now, that there has to be something that's compelling in almost a dark way. Even if you're playing somebody who is obviously on top of the world, there has to be something underneath that, whether it's an inherent sadness or a neuroses or a skeleton in the closet or something they're doing battle with, a secret, that would sort of, you know, elevate it to something far more interesting. And that's really what I look for, something that's much more three-dimensional than what's on the page.
I play Helene McCready, who is a single mother whose 4-year-old daughter gets kidnapped. But Helene is quite a dicey character. I mean, she's someone who is doing the best she can. Unfortunately, her best is really, really bad. You know, she's addicted to drugs and alcohol, and she's quite acerbic and sarcastic and sardonic. So even though people come at her, you know, to help her out, she's not very trustful of people. So she pushes a lot of people away, even when they're trying to do good.
Obviously, it's a very exhausting role.
It's exhausting, but I have to say it's more thrilling because you get to do so much. She's not just bad, you know. So you as an actor, it's thrilling. I think it's hard to watch as an audience, you know, because it's not easy to like her. But as an actor, it's a rare opportunity, and so it's one I relished.
You're a humble, soft-spoken man, but you were so good at being bad. Did portraying this hauntingly brutal character haunt you in any ways in bringing him to life?
You know what? It wasn't like it wasn't a character that was driving me crazy or anything like that. I was staying with him all the time. But sometimes when you play like characters that, like I played like drug addicts before, like you know, in like Bird and different things like that, and waking up with that kind of energy every day, that's kind of tough, you know, because there are characters I've played that didn't want to live. And Idi Amin did want to live, and so it was different in that way. Those were tougher, you know. Those characters were tough to live with. You wake up in the morning, and you think, you know, I don't feel like doing this. You know what I mean? But this was so much intensity. It was in some ways at times invigorating.
Well, actually, it wasn't that appealing to me. I have to be honest. I had to really work at you know, finding something to get me. I didn't know how to approach this part. I'd never really met anyone quite like her, and hope I never do. So, you know, it was really a collaboration with Adam, and then, but once I sort of got something and I kind of knew where I was going, I had a blast.
My character's a single mother in a small town, and she's very oppressed by her life, and she has an ex-husband who is, you know, politely unreliable, but you know, more actually can get into a sort of slightly psychotic place. And then she has a lot of really difficult things happen to her as the story goes on, and loses her child, and you know, and eventually, you know, meets a horrendous end. So it's a very traumatic story.
And what did you want to make sure that your character had? What did you bring to her that was very important?
Well, David Gordon Green really wants his actors to personalize the roles as much as they can, and so he really wanted us to bring as much of ourselves as possible, and that was great because, you know, that means he encouraged a lot of improvising, a lot of ideas. It's going to be weird for me seeing it with a lot of people because it does feel amazingly personal, especially in some of the really emotional bits. So I'm going to feel kind of naked and strange, I think.
What drew me to Kay? Well, I mean, I found her very mysterious when I read her on the page. I didn't quite know what was going on with her. I knew she, you know, had a bit of a difficult past losing her husband, and I thought it was interesting to look at. I've, you know, done some romances and played out first love, but what it was to play second love after you've already lost your first at such a young age. So, you know, that kind of appealed to me, and I also think that she's on the cusp of disappearing, and at the same time, you know, she's still very passionate and has a lot of life left to live. So I'm kind of exploring that stuff.
Oftentimes, the most compelling stories are the ones that are based on true-to-life characters, but we have found that there are very specific sensitivities to portraying people who've lived among us.
Because I cared so much about her, it was very, very difficult. At the same time, there's probably nobody who is more supportive and helped me through it than her. So she was the one who, you know, never came to set, never critiqued me, never told me, you can't do this, you must do that, make sure you do this. She went off and she traveled around the world, and she'd occasionally write and tell me, I'm in Cambodia working with a great NGO, you should get to know this woman, but that was the extent of it, and nothing to do with the movie. And then, and was really supportive when she saw it, so she's a great friend.
The biggest challenge was the second piece, was the reality television piece, because the character is John. So in a way, I'm mimicking him, and while that's fun to do when I'm away from him, it's a little bit more difficult to do it in front of him, you know, because I'm exposing him in warts and all, and that was difficult. I can't imagine how difficult it was for him. I mean, it must have been pretty strange seeing me kind of ape him all day. But I mean, it's an autobiographical experience of his, the second piece, and I think the greater challenge to that piece as well was that it was reality television. So I'm doing John without the puppets are off the strings, to quote the movie. I mean, I'm doing John without a script, because of the inherent nature of reality television. You can't really see script in the video, and. So in order to do that and pull it off successfully, we had to sort of just have an idea as to what we needed to accomplish in each scene, and that was kind of it.
We showed it to the cast and crew, and we showed it to the president and to the president of Tanzania, and to many of his generals and different people. And the people really accepted the movie and were really behind it. In fact, President Museveni said that from now on, you know, he would point to this movie when they asked him about that period to talk about what happened, at least the spirit of what happened during that time. So it was extremely well received. In fact, they talked about it was one of the biggest events that had happened in Uganda in a long time.
I'm curious to know, would you have taken this role were Katharine Hepburn still alive?
Yes, well, she was when I accepted it, and you know, unfortunately, she passed away just as I was getting on the plane to start rehearsals. So I had asked, you know, was it possible if I, you know, could meet her, but I was aware that she was very ill, so I was, you know, very sensitive not to be pushy about it.
What were you thinking about what she would have thought about your performance?
Well, her family and close friends have been very generous with me, Cynthia McFadden and the Kramers and Scott Berg. So, I mean, they seem pleased and have said that she would be pleased, so I believe them.
Well, I had a weatherman I was working with, Tom Skillen, who's out there in Chicago. He's highly regarded, and he would come to the set, and I would visit him at work and watch him go through his weather report. And what struck me about him was how positive he was. He had a very likable, upbeat energy, and it's hard not to, you know, like the guy. So that became clear to me that I wanted to convey that positive energy. And then also just learning how to do the put-ons and sort of do it in reverse because it's all backwards. That's kind of tricky.
To close our show, we'll listen to Nicole Kidman so eloquently describe how sometimes a character becomes a friend.
Acting, for me, at this particular time in my life, it saved my life. It came along, and I was so fortunate to get the chance to play Virginia at that particular time of my life because I needed it. It wasn't something, and unless you're an actor, but I don't know, maybe people do understand that, but it's something where you say, thank God that I had the chance to express myself through this character at this time, and so also I think receiving her at that time was very important to me, and being able to read and understand her voice and what she said. And I suppose that comes back to just why I think, you know, art is important in the world in terms of singular voices and collective voices, speaking to you and speaking to generations that come after you, you know, and Virginia had a huge impact on my life.
This has been Celebrity Soapbox. I'm Angela Baki. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoyed the show.